It's great to be back and to see what UnleashWD has grown into. I think there was only 30 people here for the first one, so what Dirk has done with it is really inspiring, and I'm very happy to be here. So we're going to talk today about what great innovators do differently. But before I get to that, I want to start with a question. Are you in a square peg business? Most people are, because that's how you make money. More pegs, more holes, better, faster, cheaper. That's how you beat the competition and win in the marketplace. You know, business school professors, they have a lot of fancy terms for all this stuff. Strategic DNA, core competency, continuous improvement, process optimization. But when your square peg business hits a round hole world, all that stuff really means is you're going to get better and better at a bunch of stuff that people care less and less about. So what do you do about that? It's a really tough problem. That's why good businesses fail. Not because a bunch of smart, ambitious people all of a sudden become stupid and lazy, but because their square peg business hit a round hole world and their business model lost relevance. It can happen to anybody, not just silly people. No one is immune. No business model is a birthright. And we have to decide what we're going to do about it. One thing we can try is go see what some smart people have to say about the problem. This is Tim Cook, CEO of Apple. Very, very smart guy. Runs a great business, obviously. And what he says is you need to do is make everybody in your company responsible for innovating. Get everybody involved. Drive creativity and innovation throughout your enterprise. That sounds pretty good. That makes a lot of sense. He goes on. He says what you don't want to do is to create one of these innovation divisions or appoint some vice president of innovation. He says once you do that, you might as well just put a for sale sign on the door. Okay, seems simple enough. Drive creativity and innovation throughout your enterprise. Don't set up one of these innovation divisions. But apparently, Google never got that memo, because that's exactly what they're doing at their X division, what they call their moonshot factory. So now what do you do? Are you going to innovate the Apple way or the Google way? Maybe neither. After all, Apple hasn't had a hit product for 10 years. Google maybe even longer than that. Maybe you need to find your own path. Because the only real certainty is every square peg business eventually hits its round hole world. And as leaders, we need to figure out what to do. So let's start by trying to understand what disruption actually looks like, what it really looks like. And as it turns out, it often looks like this sweet old guy. His name is Charlie Bennett. And besides being a very, very sweet old guy, he is absolutely brilliant. I mean, Charlie is so smart that when you mention his name around a lot of other really smart people, their eyes just glaze over. Because Charlie is truly in a class by himself. Now, when he was growing up back in the 1950s, he was, as he put it to me, a geek before geeks were cool. So while the other boys were trading baseball cards or playing ball down at the sandlot, what really excited Charlie was Watson and Crick's discovery of the structure of DNA. Seriously. Charlie's a little different. So he went to college, majored in biochemistry, and then went to Harvard to do his graduate work. And being an exceptional student, James Watson actually chose Charlie to be his teaching assistant. So Charlie spent a lot of time explaining to undergraduates how these long strands of RNA would migrate out of the nucleus, meet up with ribosomes, throw off these amino acids that would create the proteins that build structures and regulate processes in every cell in our bodies. And then one semester, he took an elective course on the theory of computation. It was the first time he came across the concept of a Turing machine. Long strings of code that go through a single reader and produce universal computation. Charlie thought to himself, that sort of seems a lot like the stuff I'm teaching in Watson's class. He thought it was the coolest thing ever. That DNA could be some kind of computer. That nature could produce computation by itself. So he never became a geneticist. He went to work for IBM as a research scientist. And he did some important early theoretical work on some things like reversible computing and some other stuff. But his big breakthrough came in 1993 when he helped lead something called the quantum teleportation experiment. It was important for two reasons. The first was it helped disprove one of Einstein's last theories. The second, and maybe even more importantly, it led Charlie, just a few months later, to write down his 4 laws of quantum information. Now, I know that sounds horribly abstract. And it is. But that's what it looks like. That's what disruption looks like. The next big thing always starts out looking like nothing at all. If it was obvious, we wouldn't miss it, and it wouldn't be so disruptive. So let's bring Charlie's idea into a little bit more focus. There's another scientist at IBM, Jay Gambetta, and he's sitting there with a tablet computer, which is hundreds of times more powerful than the original PC, despite being just a fraction of the cost, because of something we call Moore's Law, the consistent doubling of computing power every 18 to 24 months. But that's not what makes this picture special, not that continuity of the tablet computer, but the discontinuity of what that tablet computer is connected to, which is a quantum computer based on Charlie's ideas that has the potential to be thousands, if not millions of times, more powerful than today's technology. So how's that going to affect your business? Well, for starters, it's going to make eventually going to make all of our current encryption protocols obsolete. So if your business involves any transactions, like selling things to customers or paying suppliers, it's going to have a pretty big effect. Other applications being explored range from artificial intelligence, materials science, medical research, managing large and complex financial portfolios. But we've really just begun to scratch the surface because these things don't work that well yet. Commercial versions are still just a couple of years off. So let's see where quantum computing fits in with the Gartner hype cycle. And I'm sure those of you with telescopic vision have already noticed it right there in the middle of like 20 other things. And like all those other things, it's going to get hyped up to the peak of inflated expectations, come crashing down to the trough of disillusionment, and then slowly creep up the slope of enlightenment to where it hits the plateau of productivity and starts having a serious competitive impact within 5 to 10 years. So I think maybe you can start to see the problem. And by the way, this chart understates the problem because Gartner really focuses on information technology. Doesn't really follow the things that are going on in genomics and CRISPR and material science and nanotechnology. So how do we keep track of all this stuff and still do the things we need to do to run our businesses? Like take care of customers, manage employees, meet the payroll. The answer is simple. You can't. And you shouldn't even try. But what you can do is focus on problems you can solve out in the marketplace and within your organization. And that's what can transform all of this technological advancement from a source of disruption to a source of incredible possibility and opportunity. So how do you do that? That's what I wanted to know. I spent the majority of my adult life managing organizations. And like many of you, I felt an incredible pressure to innovate. But I couldn't find any clear guidance of how to go about it. It's not that there wasn't any innovation ideas. There was plenty of them. Disruptive innovation, open innovation, lean launch pads, design thinking. But which one was I supposed to use? So that's what started my journey that led to the book, Mapping Innovation. I went out and I studied and I met every great innovator I could find, from massive global corporations to world-class labs to startups of every shape and size you can think of. And I found that they all had one thing in common. There was one thing that was truly universal. And can anybody guess what that thing is? They were constantly seeking out new problems to solve. That sounds pretty simple in theory, but in practice, it's actually pretty hard. Because as we all know, we get pretty busy with the problems that are right in front of us. To go out and find new problems to solve, it's not really on our horizon. But the great innovators that I studied, the thing that really made them different was they had a systematic and disciplined process to find new problems. This is Eric Haller. He works for Experian. And what he noticed was that his organization was getting trapped in their own P&L. Any new opportunity that couldn't be quantified was a non-starter. He saw they were missing out, so he created something called data labs. It's a separate unit from their operational divisions, doesn't have any revenue targets or P&L or anything like that, has one mission: to go out to customers and find out what problems they need solved. Or as Eric likes to say, what's giving them agita. When they identify a new problem, a good new problem, they bring it back to data labs, which is stocked full of world-class data scientists, and they can usually bring back a working prototype within 90 days. From there, they co-create a full-scale product with the customer, and eventually it goes back to one of the operational divisions to be scaled up into a business. In the past 5 years, Data Labs has launched more than a dozen multi-million-dollar businesses this way, and it's become an engine of growth for a $4 billion company. IBM has a similar idea. They call it Grand Challenges. I'm sure you heard of the last one, the Jeopardy Grand Challenge. It's what led to Watson, which is becoming an engine of growth for IBM. But they're not looking for problems that they can solve in 90 days. They're looking for problems that will take them years or even decades to solve. Google's 20% time works as like a human search engine for problems. Because if somebody's 20% time project starts attracting a lot of people to work on it, they know that's something they need to look seriously at. So different organizations have different ways of doing it, but that one basic idea remains the same. Go out and find new problems. This is one of the most interesting people I met. His name is Jim Allison, and he told me in his very endearing South Texas twang that he just likes figuring stuff out. So when he was finishing up graduate school in the 1970s, they had just discovered T cells. And he thought it was so cool that these things would kind of zip around and kill stuff for us, but not actually hurt us. And nobody knew how it worked. So he said, I want to figure that stuff out. And he did. He became a prominent immunology researcher, made important discoveries in the field of immune regulation. And then in the mid-1990s, he had this idea. He said, maybe the problem with cancer, maybe it's not that our immune system can't recognize the antigen, but it puts the brakes on the immune response too soon. Maybe if we can just pull those brakes off, we could really make something happen. So he did some experiments. He did some mouse experiments. And the results were astounding. He told me it was like the tumors almost melted in front of his eyes. So he ran to all the big pharmaceutical companies to show them what he'd found. And they said, no way. They said, we got burned with all this immuno stuff back in the 1980s. Hundreds of trials. We blew through billions of dollars. We're not doing that again. Jim told me it was depressing because he knew this could make a difference. But he said, I'm going to figure this out too. It took him 3 years. Eventually, he found a small biotech company willing to back him. Clinical trials started in 2004. One of the first patients was a young woman named Sharon Belvin, just 22 years old, with a very aggressive form of melanoma. She'd been through chemo, radiation, you name it. Nothing worked. She had less than a year to live. She started the treatments. A few months later, she was in remission. Today, Sharon is in her mid-30s. She's got 2 kids, works as a fitness instructor, and has been cancer-free for over a decade. And as you probably know, cancer immunotherapy isn't considered to be speculative anymore. It's a major field of its own. It's become the 4th pillar of cancer treatment. Thousands of people are working on it. Many believe that Jim is on the shortest of shortlists for the Nobel Prize. So if you want to know the secret to innovation, that's it right there. Find a good problem and start figuring stuff out. So if I can leave you with one final message today, it's this. The biggest misconception about innovation is that it's about ideas. The truth is, nobody cares what your ideas are. They care about the problems you can solve. So don't go out looking for some great idea. Go and find a meaningful problem and start figuring stuff out. Thank you very much.